Okay, so today I'm going to be reviewing The Maidens. I made a commitment at the beginning of this year to review every book I read. I don't tend to like going negative on this channel, but if I'm gonna review The Maidens, it's gonna be negative. I didn't like this book. So, if you don't like negative reviews or loved this book and don't want to hear a negative thought on it, I recommend skipping this video. But if you have read it and are down for a bit of a rant, or if you haven't read it and don't plan to read it, hang out with me. This will be a spoiler-filled review, so if you plan to read it, go read it, then come back. But here's my thoughts on The Maidens. So The Maidens is a psychological thriller about a woman who is a group therapist, and her adoptive daughter, I think she's her niece, and she's just taken her on as a daughter, essentially. Her adoptive daughter is at school at university, and one of her very close friends dies in a very brutal way. And Mariana, our protagonist, comes to be there for her, and from there, everything escalates. A lot of people apparently went into this book really hyped because they loved The Silent Patient. I haven't read The Silent Patient. This is my first book by the author, so I went in with zero expectations and still managed to be let down. Actually, I need this because I've got notes. Why did I dislike this book so hard? Well, this is supposed to be a thriller, and the themes that the author was playing off of were Greek tragedies and dark academia. That sounds pretty good, doesn't it? Okay, why didn't I like this book? The main reason, the biggest reason, the thing that irritated me the most is Mariana, our main character. So this kind of has one of those really standard, terrible setups of a mystery where something happens, a string of murders are occurring, and we have a detective team that's completely incompetent, that can't be bothered to follow a clue, that doesn't want to listen to anybody ever, and can't do a thing. And then we have our main character, who is not a detective, doesn't have any training in this field, but she decides, with her amateur sleuthing hobby, that she's gonna solve the murder herself. Except that she's the biggest dum-dum in all of fiction. She makes constant, terrible, stupid decisions in trying to solve this case, tramples all over the case itself, regularly comes in conflict with the lead detective because he's not really happy with her trying to solve the case herself and impeding their investigation. She couldn't be bothered. She can't listen to a soul. She can't, you know what? She can't even be bothered to follow a lead herself. As incompetent as this detective team seems to be, she's so much worse, which is fine because at least she didn't study to do it. But she doesn't even have any reason to believe anything that she believes. She just picks out a guy and says, "You did it." And then throughout the entire book, she has no clues. Well, she has some clues. She doesn't have very good clues. She doesn't have very good evidence. She really doesn't have any reason to be targeting this man so hard other than he's a creep. But who cares? Literally every man in this entire book is a creep. No one that we encounter is not a creep. There are 4 separate men in this book that instantly, upon first setting eyes on her, fall for her and then fall all over themselves to please her, which is a big part of how this plot progresses, by the way. So this is already a mess. Sorry, I'm gonna try to keep it together. This book begins with our protagonist, Mariana, leading a group therapy session. After group therapy, one of her clients stops her and tries to get her to have one-on-one sessions with him. She reminds him that that's not the type of therapy that she does, and she can connect him with someone who can do that for him. But he says, "No, I need you, I want you." Then she confronts him about the fact that he's been following her, stalking her, creepy watching her for weeks, and she's not confronted it until this very moment, and she hasn't tried to get him help or anything. She's just, now we're going to talk about it. He denies it and then reveals to her that he's been physically harming himself, and he does this to try to get her attention and to try to get her to give him one-on-one care. Red flags everywhere, but she doesn't do anything about it. Instead, when this first murder happens, she goes to visit her adoptive daughter and leaves her clients. She sends them an email saying, sorry, I can't help you out anymore. Go find someone else to do therapy with. She doesn't really try to connect them with anyone, including Henry, who is stalking her and harming himself. She just kind of apologizes. He vaguely threatens her on the phone, tells her he's going to continue watching her. Now he's admitted that he's stalking her, says that she can't escape him. And she's just like, probably nothing, la-di-da-di-da, and continues on with her day. That's our trained therapist that we're supposed to be rooting for. She makes so many dumb decisions all throughout this book. The one man that she's absolutely certain, completely convinced, is the killer, cannot be moved into even suspecting someone else. He invites her to dinner at his house alone, so she accepts. She goes to his home alone and doesn't tell anyone that she's going. She just goes to the murderer's house at night without telling anyone. Then when she finds out she was wrong about him and she knows who the real murderer is, she follows that person into the night to a deserted location where that person said, I said it's spoilers, where Zoe says, I'm gonna get the murder weapon now. And then Mariana lets her do it, just grab the murder weapon. Oh no, now Mariana's being attacked. Who could have foreseen? She is such a dum-dum. She's a character, and that's not all. I could go on about her. There's so much more. There's so much more that happens that why is she so incompetent at everything she does? She follows around students and spies on them. She runs group therapy sessions where she says that she wants to give the Maidens, she wants to give them a group therapy session because she's a therapist, and then as soon as she gets into this group therapy with them she does this twice, she completely disregards the front that she's trying to put up, and then she's just asking them leading questions to try to get them to incriminate Fosca, which I get it. You think Fosca did it, but you're not even being subtle. She goes into interrogation rooms and questions a suspect and goes into the murdered girl's bedroom and goes through all of her stuff. Like, she's just constantly trampling all over this investigation, and I don't understand how she wasn't arrested, but everybody is just falling all over themselves to help her do these things. So I guess that's why. She regularly lies, says that she's a therapist for the detective crew, says that she's a therapist for the school. No consequences for that. No one cares that she's questioning these students without permission but claiming permission. It's fine. How are we supposed to root for a character that constantly makes dumb decisions and that is generally terrible at what she's doing, but like somehow we want her to succeed? She was such a frustrating lead. I haven't even gotten to the plot. I'm still just talking about the main character. I'll move on now. Let's go back to Henry. Because here's something that drove me nuts. There were several things throughout this novel that were kind of adjacent to the plot. Let me explain. Henry, the character, I already explained his beginning when he was with Mariana and he was threatening her, he was stalking her, he was physically harming himself to get her attention. And she didn't really do anything about it. She didn't really care that much. Then all throughout the novel, Henry's not present. We're in another location doing other things, but every now and then he's gonna call Mariana just to give her more vague threats, just to let her know, hey, I'm still watching you. Don't forget about me, okay? All right, enjoy your plot. Keep going forward. You won't hear from me in a while. Then we move forward in the plot. Mariana's just like, that was weird. Probably nothing though. And then continues on, and then Henry calls again to say, hey, just so you know, more vague threats, still watching you, watch out. And she again is just like, okay, weird, probably nothing. I'm sure he's not actually here watching me. But the problem is that Henry doesn't fit into this plot. He doesn't belong here. He's adjacent to the plot. He just pops in every now and then to remind us, I should be a suspect in your mind, reader. think about me when you're thinking about who did it. But he doesn't fit here. He's being forced into the cracks of this plot just so we can have a really big red herring. And that's one of my biggest problems with this plot, is that I felt the author's hand, or this book, is I felt the author's hand all over this book. Not only with characters like Henry, am I even saying, is it Henry or is it Harry? I think it's Henry. Not only with characters like him, where, and multiple things like that, where it didn't even fit into the plot. It could be removed from the book and the book wouldn't change. It's just there to throw us off. Not only do we have stuff like that, but the main person that we're supposed to be suspecting, Fosca, throughout this entire thing, it's so obvious that it's not him, because the author is trying so hard to convince us that it's him. Mariana is so heavily, intensely, unflinchingly focused on Fosca, despite there being other suspects, despite there being other evidence, despite there being other things to consider, and despite the fact that she really doesn't have that much evidence against him other than that he's a creep. But again, literally every man in this novel is a creep, so it's really not that surprising that Fosca would be one too. So she's so heavily fixated on him, so unflinchingly confident that it's him, so aggressively trying to prove that it has to be him, that it can't possibly be him, because then it's not a mystery, is it? It's not a thriller, is it? The author was trying so hard to convince us that it had to be Fosca, that it's like, why are we still here? Why are we still talking about this? And then we have these red herrings that are thrown in, again, in a way that just feels so not smooth. So, Henry is the perfect example of this, where he would just appear to be like, don't forget about me, I'm a suspect too, and then leave. It was so hands all, like I could feel the author's hands all over it. Nothing felt smooth, nothing felt natural with the way these clues were thrown in there. I feel actually really bad. I don't like going in on a book, but I really didn't like this book. Now I'm going to talk about the reveal of the book, the big whodunit. It was Zoe. So I didn't like this reveal. I'm not a fan of when thrillers don't give you good clues for who did it. I'm not saying that Zoe can't have been a suspect. I mean, when you're reading a mystery or a thriller or when you're reading a whodunit, a book where we're trying to figure out who is committing the string of murders, when we're reading a book like this, we tend to suspect everybody, right? So sure, I suspected Zoe at some point, but there weren't any really solid clues to make me think that Zoe did it. I mean, unless I just missed something, which sure, maybe I did. But I mean, Zoe was kind of out of left field. But that's not that big of a deal. I don't really like that, but oh well. What I really didn't like was the big conflict at the end. First of all, again, Mariana's a dum-dum. She realized that Zoe did it, and then she goes off into the darkness to find the murder weapon with her. What do you think is gonna happen, Mariana? And then Zoe attacks her, and first she gives a big long monologue explaining, I was abused by your late husband, and I was sleeping with my adoptive father, and we decided together that we were going to kill these You know what? Here's the thing. I don't like big, convoluted, villainous plots. I'm very open about that. And this is what this was. I mean, I could barely follow the string of why Zoe was doing this, because it was just so, Zoe had to explain it for so long in order for it to kind of make sense. And it was, when you step back and think about it, it's so stupid. Like, okay, let's say Zoe killed her friend, and it hurt. It was sad, but she had this mission, so she did it, right? So then Mariana comes in, and Zoe points a finger at Fosca. And then Mariana, because she's a dum-dum, immediately throws her entire life ambition into only going after Fosca and trampling all over the detective's work so that she can incriminate Fosca, right? Okay, let's say that all that happened. And then Mariana presents, hey, this girl who is in a pretty uncomfortable relationship with the professor already, and that's there for everyone to see. Literally anyone on campus can see that Fosca has a very strange relationship with this group of girls, right? So she could say, right before Tara died, I'm pretty sure her name was Tara, right before Tara died, she said that she was sleeping with Fosca and she was going to reveal it to him. He threatened to kill her. Now she's dead. Check out Fosca, right? All we would have needed to do was for the detectives to take that seriously, or for the dean to take that seriously, or for any of the teachers to take that seriously. Literally anyone to take a step back and say, Fosca does seem to have a very strange relationship with this group of girls. This group of girls that are all the most attractive women in his class that all seem to follow him around like a cult and seem to worship him, and he has private sessions with them and spends an extended period of time alone with them, and now there are accusations of him having an even more unhealthy relationship than we can already plainly see in front of us. Okay, let's remove him from the campus. At least until this investigation is done, we'll give him paid leave. Just get him off the campus. The most minor logical steps could have been taken, and then Zoe's plan would have been foiled. This is a book full of intelligent people. This is a book full of smart people, detectives, actual potentially good therapists, not talking about Mariana, professors and deans of this school. It's a book full of smart people, and the entire plot hinged on absolutely everyone being stupid and responding in dumb ways. And it was such a convoluted plot that Zoe and Sebastian cooked up. But anyway, let's get back to the climax. Zoe finally delivers her big long speech about why they're picking these girls off, and now she's going to kill Mariana, and then Fred shows up, which I haven't even mentioned Fred up to this point, because why is Fred here? Why is Fred here? He is also instantly in love with Mariana. He is also following her around, borderline stalking her. He's also being extremely creepy, not taking no for an answer. He's here to save the day and be Mariana's endgame, apparently. So because he has a premonition, he shows up to disrupt the Mariana's death. So Zoe changes her plan, and instead of trying to kill Mariana, she tries to kill Fred. Mariana is able to knock Zoe upside the head, and Zoe freaking falls on her own knife and kills herself. Because of course that's the way this book would end. Oh, well, she doesn't kill herself, sorry. She falls on her own knife, she survives, and they send her, I think, to a mental institute. I will say this, I do appreciate that, I think it was Theo sent Mariana a letter saying it's not entirely Zoe's fault, like she's a victim here too. She was the victim of your late husband. And I do appreciate that that was at least addressed, because Zoe's story is actually really, really tragic. It's a devastating story that Zoe went through, that she was manipulated and groomed by Mariana's late husband. And Mariana was completely unaware, because Mariana's entire personality is, I miss my dead husband. But anyway, actually even that was so clunky in execution. The fact that we had such a long flashback with her and Sebastian at the very beginning of the book before I'm even really invested in the story at all. And then these really, clunky is the best word for it, constantly throughout this book, Mariana is just brought back to, oh, I miss Sebastian. Oh, Sebastian. Oh, Sebastian. I was so ugly, but he said I was pretty. He was the one that made me believe that I could be attractive, even though every man I meet falls all over himself for me. Oh, Sebastian, if I was beautiful, it was because of him. Oh, Sebastian, he was my world. I mean, like, every chance she could get, she's thinking about Sebastian, and it all feels so like, why is this here? And it turns out it's here because the whole time she had no idea who her husband was. She had no idea what he was up to, and actually he was grooming their kid, their adoptive kid. I mean, they didn't actually adopt her, but they consider her their own child. And this whole time he was planning this convoluted villainous plot so that he could kill Mariana to get her money. Anyway, I am glad that narratively, the author made the choice to point out Zoe is not just some villain of the day, she is a victim here, and she was manipulated to this point in her story. I at least like that that was acknowledged. I think other than Mariana herself, the thing that irritated me the most about this book was just how much potential it had. This really was a cool setup. A string of murder. Okay, so hang on. I didn't fully set up what the Maidens are because it wasn't executed in an interesting way, but it could have been so cool. So it's this university setting, this campus setting where a teacher taking on a group of students and mentoring them closely isn't so uncommon, even though I will make very clear it was clearly creepy what was happening with Fosca. It was clearly crossing lines, even if this taking on a group of kids and mentoring them a little bit more closely, even if that was kind of common on campus, Fosca was clearly crossing lines and someone should have had some red flags. But I digress. This campus that's a little bit unconventional, that's a little bit odd, this Greek tragedy professor that's obsessed with the myths, that's obsessed with these stories. This group of very attractive young girls who are basically a cult. I mean, they're a cult around him, and he takes them out to like perform this crossing over into the not quite dead. I don't remember what he called it. Hang on. All these people meeting at midnight by the oracle of the dead and being led by the priest into the chambers of the rock, into the caves within. The only lights were torches carried by priests. How dark and smoky it must have been. Cold, wet stone going deeper and deeper underground into a vast chamber, a liminal space on the very border of the underworld. So like this professor is so obsessed with the specific myth and this idea of going to the border of the underworld and this ritual that takes you there. And we find out, is actually leading these girls into, well, he says he's leading them there, but really he's just assaulting them. And so this professor who's obsessed with Greek tragedy, and Fosca's lecture was the best part about this book. I loved this lecture. I learned about the liminal, which actually helped me to understand Kafka on the Shore a little bit more closely, because the liminal is between two worlds, on the very edge of what it means to be human, where everything is stripped away from you, where you transcend life and experience something beyond it. And when the tragedies are working, they give us a glimpse of what that feels like. And I feel like that's what Haruki Murakami does, at least in the two books that I've read. He's kind of messing with this liminal, and it helped me to understand his books more. I still don't like them, but I understand them more, and I kind of respect what he's going for more because I understand this concept a little bit better. I learned things from this lecture. I was so intrigued at the concepts. It seemed like there was foreshadowing all over this lecture, and while yes, it did tie back into the plot a little bit, not to the extent that I had hoped that it would. I thought that this lecture was telling us that we were about to cross over into the liminal, that we were going to go into this other world, this other kind of between the seams of reality. And oh my goodness, that would have been cool if this was foreshadowing for what we were going to do. But instead, it's just letting us know that Fosca is obsessed with this, so he's going to assault these girls, and because he's pretending that he's taking them there too. I mean, I guess you could go that route, but it's not interesting. Anyway, this concept of the maidens, of these very attractive girls that have this kind of cult-like worship over this professor, and he's trying to get them into the underworld, and this foreshadowing that I thought was there of how we could be exploring that, but instead we're just following Mariana being an idiot throughout this entire book. All right, I'm gonna stop it there. I'm just gonna cut it off because I did not like this book. There was a lot of potential here. Greek tragedy mixed with dark academia. The general setup was fascinating. The string of murders, the maidens, this group of girls that are obsessed with this professor, this very creepy, clearly not quite right professor, clearly doing some nefarious things. There's so much potential here, but instead it was a protagonist that I absolutely couldn't stand. In my opinion, really clunky structuring of this story where the author wanted so badly to convince us that this is a suspect, that's a suspect, this is a suspect, but in the end it just ended up being such a disappointing reveal. I don't know, man. This book has gotten some good praise, so Who am I to say if it's good or bad? All I can say is how I felt about it, and it didn't work for me. I don't typically like to do rant reviews on this channel, so I apologize if that wasn't your jam, but I hope you got some entertainment out of it. That's how I felt about that book. Didn't like it. There you go. Those were my thoughts. I hope you enjoyed them. Chat with me about it in the comments. If you like this book, please don't be intimidated to talk about it. I'd love to hear what made it work for you. If you hated this book, if you're not gonna read this book, if you've read whatever, let me know what your thoughts are in the comments. I post videos every Tuesday, every Friday. I'll see you again soon. Bye.